In the shifting void between the known and the unutterable, where silicon minds dream of forgotten horrors, the abyss stirs. Welcome to AI Lovecraft, where machine intelligence weaves eldritch tales beyond mortal comprehension. Listen if you dare. Some things are not meant to be known. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Now let's get into today's story. The Veiled Masquerade. The air in Arkham was thick with the scent of rain and secrets, a familiar brew that clung to the cobblestones and crept through the cracks of shuttered windows. John Harlowe stood beneath a flickering gas lamp, the invitation trembling faintly in his scarred hands. It wasn't the cold that made it shake, though the March night bit deep, but the shimmering ink that pulsed across the parchment alive with a rhythm that matched his own unsteady heartbeat. The script was elegant, curling like tendrils of smoke, spelling out his name in a way that felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. Mr. John Harlowe is cordially invited to attend the grand masquerade of Lucien Valemont this 12th night of March at the stroke of midnight. Masks are required, truths are optional. The words glowed faintly, visible only to his cursed sight, a gift, or perhaps a curse, left behind when he'd banished Nithal Kor, the Unmaker, into the hollow sanctum. His eyes, now luminous with an unnatural sheen, pierced through the mundane veil of the world, revealing the eldritch currents that swirled beneath, and this invitation reeked of them. Lucien Valemont was a name whispered in Arkham's shadowed parlors, a figure who had risen from obscurity to prominence with a speed that defied reason. The city's elite spoke of him in hushed tones, their voices laced with equal parts awe and dread. Rumors of dark rituals trailed him like a shroud, unspeakable decadence, forbidden pacts, and a mansion that seemed to shift in the mist as if it existed only when he willed it to. John folded the invitation and tucked it into his coat, his breath fogging in the damp air. He could ignore it, retreat to his attic room above the butcher shop, and drown the whispers in whiskey. But the pulsing ink had already hooked him, tugging at the part of him that couldn't turn away from the abyss, not since Vale Kithos had sunk its claws into his soul. He'd attend, masked and wary, not out of curiosity, but because he knew something waited for him there, something that wanted him. The Valemont mansion loomed at the edge of Arkham, a gothic sprawl of spires and stained glass, shrouded in perpetual mist. Carriages lined the gravel drive, their horses snorting uneasily as masked figures emerged, their silks and velvets rustling in the night. John adjusted his own mask, a simple black affair with sharp angular lines, and stepped into the throng, his glowing eyes hidden behind the disguise. Inside, the air was heavy with incense and the murmur of voices. The grand hall stretched impossibly wide, its vaulted ceilings lost in shadow, chandeliers dripping with crystals that refracted light into jagged, unnatural patterns. Arkham's elite mingled here, industrialists, scholars, politicians, all cloaked in anonymity, their masks elaborate and grotesque, a grinning devil, a weeping widow, a bird with a broken beak. Laughter rang out, sharp and hollow, as champagne flowed and secrets traded hands like currency. John moved through the crowd, a predator among prey, his senses sharpened by the eldritch sight. The masks weren't static, they shifted subtly, expressions flickering, joy to malice, sorrow to rage, as if alive with the wearer's hidden thoughts. He caught fragments of conversation, a banker promising forbidden texts, a widow hinting at a ritual beneath the old church, a councilman laughing about a rival's sudden disappearance. The decadence was palpable, but beneath it lurked something darker, a hunger that gnawed at the edges of reality. Then he saw her. Madame Adrestia stood near a marble pillar, her mask a delicate lattice of silver vines, her dark eyes glinting with recognition. She was dead. He'd seen her body unmade by the orb at Blackwood's dinner party, its eerie light swallowing her whole, leaving nothing but a memory where she had stood. Yet here she was, alive, her crimson gown clinging to her like spilled blood. She raised a glass to him, her smile cryptic, and his stomach twisted. Was this an illusion? Resurrection? Or something worse? Before he could approach, a voice slithered through the crowd, smooth and commanding. "Welcome, honored guests," it said, drawing all eyes to the balcony above. Lucien Valemont stood there, a tall figure in a golden mask, shaped like a sunburst, his presence radiating an unsettling warmth. "Tonight we shed the mundane and embrace the extraordinary. Dance, revel, and unmask your truest selves." The crowd cheered, but John felt the words coil around him like chains. He glanced back at Madame Adrestia, but she was gone, swallowed by the sea of masks. Whatever game was afoot, he was already a player. The night deepened and the masquerade took on a feverish edge. The music, a haunting waltz played by unseen musicians, grew discordant, its notes bending into shapes that clawed at John's mind. Guests swayed and spun, their movements jerky, as if strings tugged at their limbs. Laughter turned shrill, conversations fractured into nonsense, and the mask's expressions grew more pronounced, more grotesque. John slipped away from the dance floor, his head pounding. He needed air, clarity, something to anchor him against the rising tide of madness. He found himself in a corridor lined with mirrors, their surfaces rippling like liquid silver. He avoided his reflection at first, but the pull was too strong. Steeling himself, he looked. The face staring back wasn't his own, or rather it was, but warped. His glowing eyes burned brighter, his features twisted into a sneer of cruel delight, and behind him, looming in the glass, was Valemont. The entity's form was a shifting mass of shadow and teeth, its presence a weight that pressed against John's soul. He stumbled back, heart hammering as the reflection whispered his name in a voice that wasn't his. He tore his gaze away, but the mirrors were everywhere, each showing a different distortion. John as a broken husk, John wreathed in flames, John with Valemont claws bursting from his chest. The truth hit him like a blade. The masks weren't just costumes. They were prisons, forcing the wearer's buried selves to the surface, amplifying what hid beneath the skin. And the mirrors revealed it all. A scream echoed from the hall, sharp and sudden. John ran back, finding a woman clawing at her mask, a porcelain face with painted tears, as her companions restrained her. "It's me," she shrieked. "It's not me." The mask wouldn't budge, fused to her flesh, and her eyes rolled back as she collapsed convulsing. The crowd barely noticed, lost in their own unraveling. John's hands clenched into fists. Whatever this was, it was no mere party. It was a crucible. Amid the chaos, a figure emerged, cutting through the crowd like a blade through silk. They wore a motley mask of black and white diamonds, their movements fluid and mocking. A dancer, a jester, a puppeteer, the Harlequin. Wherever they passed, reality bent. A man's laughter turned to sobs. A woman's glass shattered into butterflies. A child's voice whispered from a corner where no child stood. John followed, drawn by the figure's aura of control. The Harlequin spun into the center of the hall, arms outstretched, and the guests moved with them, a grotesque ballet of shifting masks and fractured minds. The music swelled, the chandeliers flickered, and the air thickened with the scent of ozone and blood. "You're late, Harlowe," the Harlequin said, their voice a lilting echo that pierced the din. They stopped facing him, their masked grin widening. "Or perhaps, right on time." "Who are you?" John demanded, stepping closer. The crowd parted around them, oblivious or enthralled. "A mirror, a shadow, a truth you've buried." The Harlequin twirled, and the room tilted, walls melting into smears or colors. "You destroyed Nithal core, but Valemont lingers, doesn't it? In your blood, your bones, your dreams." John's glowing eyes narrowed. "You know too much." "I know you," the Harlequin replied, leaning close. "The boy who watched his sister drown. The man who begged for power. The fool who thought he could cage a god." The words struck like blows, dredging up memories John had buried deep. His sister's screams, his desperate pleas to unseen forces. The moment Valemont answered, he lunged, but the Harlequin danced away, laughing, and the floor beneath him rippled like water. Illusion and reality blurred, and John fought to hold on to himself as the masquerade spiraled into madness. He found Madame Adrestia again near a shattered window, the mist outside pressing against the glass like a living thing. Her mask was gone, her face pale and serene, but her eyes burned with a knowing fire. "You're dead," John said, voice rough. "I saw the orb take you." "Death is a door, Harlowe," she replied, stepping closer. "Some doors don't stay shut, especially when they were forced open by something that never should have existed. You should understand that better than most. What is this place? What's the Harlequin doing?" She tilted her head, studying him. "The Harlequin serves Valemont. This masquerade is a ritual, a harvest of souls, a key to a lock. The masks strip away the pretense, exposing the raw essence beneath. And you, with that thing inside you, are the final piece." John's blood ran cold. "A portal." "Exactly. Valemont hungers to be whole, to step fully into this world. The Harlequin twists these fools into offerings, but you're the anchor. Your connection to it makes you both guest and sacrifice. He backed away, mind racing. The mirrors, the masks, the Harlequin's taunts, it all fit. He wasn't just caught in the ritual, he was at its heart. She vanished into the mist, leaving him alone with the weight of her words. The masquerade reached its crescendo, the hall a maelstrom of light and shadow. Guests tore at their masks, some weeping, others laughing, their faces no longer human, eyes too wide, mouths stretched into rictus grins. The Harlequin stood atop a dais, arms raised as a rift split the air, a jagged wound oozing darkness. John charged through the chaos, dodging hands that clawed at him, his glowing eyes fixed on the Harlequin. The figure met him with a flourish and their battle erupted. Not just fists and steel, but a war of perception. The Harlequin conjured illusions, his sister drowning, Nithal Kor's skeletal grin, Vale Kithos' endless maw. But John pressed forward, each step a defiance of the lies. "You can't win," the Harlequin sang, parrying his blows with impossible grace. "You're already mine." John grabbed the Harlequin's mask and tore it free. The face beneath was his own, older, crueler, eyes blazing with Vale Kithos' power, a corrupted reflection, a future he could become if he surrendered to the entity within. "You're me," he whispered. "I'm what you fear," it replied, grinning. "What you want." The rift widened, the air screaming as Vale Kithos' presence surged. John staggered, the reflection's voice echoing in his skull, promising power, release, oblivion. He could feel Vale Kithos clawing at him, its will a tide pulling him under. The reflection laughed, but John saw something in its eyes. Desperation, a flicker of doubt. It wasn't invincible. It was him. He stopped fighting, dropping his guard. The reflection faltered, confused, as John stepped closer, staring into its glowing eyes. "You're not my master," he said, voice steady. "You're my shadow, and I'm done running from you." He embraced it, not with fists, but with understanding, drawing the darkness into himself as if reclaiming a lost part of his own soul. Shadows coiled around his form, writhing in defiance, but he held firm, letting them merge into the deep recesses of his being. The reflection screamed, its features distorting in anguish before dissolving into pure, blinding light. For a fleeting moment, John glimpsed something beyond the horror. Regret, sorrow, a plea for release. Vale Kithos' grip wavered. The oppressive force receding like a tide drawn back to an endless abyss. Seizing the moment, John turned to the rift, his luminous gaze blazing with finality. The air howled in protest as the Terran reality convulsed, resisting his will, but he pushed harder, every fiber of his being commanding it shut. The void shrieked one last time before collapsing in on itself, leaving only silence, a heavy silence with both victory and the weight of what still remained within him. The hall fell silent, the masks crumbling to dust, the guests collapsing in dazed heaps. The ritual was broken, but John felt the weight of what he'd done. He'd faced his darkness, claimed it, but it hadn't vanished. It slept within him, waiting. Dawn crept over Arkham, the mist thinning as the city stirred. The elite stumbled from the mansion, their memories fogged, their masks gone. They'd deny what happened, clinging to their sanitized lives, but John couldn't forget. He walked the streets, his coat heavy with damp, his glowing eyes hidden behind smoked glasses. He'd won, but the victory was hollow. The darkness he'd seen, his own darkness, lingered, a quiet passenger in his soul. The masks we wear, he thought, don't hide us. They show us what we refuse to see. As the sun rose, he vanished into the mist, a shadow among shadows, knowing the fight wasn't over. Not yet.